Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. I didn't realize how much of a role food played in my addiction until I actually got to a point where I started paying more attention to what I was eating and drinking in recovery. And in today's video, I want to talk about that a little bit, starting with reading what Tommy Rosen has to say about it in his book, Recovery 2.0. He says, "Your relationship with food directly influences the way you experience life. The connection goes much deeper than you may realize. Your energy level, food, thinking, actions, immunity against disease, all functions of the body and mind are affected by the food and water you consume. Therefore, any attempt to understand addiction that does not include a deep look at your relationship with food will be sadly incomplete. It doesn't matter whether you are a drug addict, alcoholic, sex addict, compulsive gambler, or emotional food binger. There is an intimate connection between what you eat and how you think, feel, and behave." So when I was in my addiction, I didn't think about it that much, but I used food much in the same way that I used drugs and alcohol. It was an outlet for comfort. It was a way for me to get a quick hit of something that sparked those chemicals, those pleasure chemicals in my brain. And I didn't exercise much restraint or thoughtfulness in how I engaged with food. The way that I typically engaged with food was what sounds the most fun to eat at this moment, and then I'd go and get that, typically overindulge in what I was eating, and then be left feeling either regretful that I ate so much or just lethargic and not very fueled by the food, which is what it's supposed to do. And so I found myself in a situation where I would go back and forth, and sometimes for periods of time, much like in my addiction, I could exercise some thoughtfulness in the way that in my relationship with food. There would be some situations where I might go a few weeks on a diet where I ate a lot of salads and where I did less processed foods and things like that. But for the most part, I really did not practice any kind of mindful relationship with food. And that's a term you hear a lot these days, is mindful eating. And just being mindful of what you're putting on your plate, what you're eating, that kind of thing. And this started to become really apparent when I went into treatment for my addictions and other mental issues. When I was in treatment, I went to treatment at a place that I'm very fortunate cooked home cooked meals every day, and they were working with a nutritionist to design these meals to be healthy, and also to help teach the people there what kind of things can be cooked that taste fantastic but are also healthy, as well as what portions are appropriate. And while I was at this treatment center, I ate like a king, and I also lost an enormous amount of weight. Came out of there looking pretty good. Now, when I came out of the treatment center, I tried to practice that, but I found it a little bit difficult to balance, keeping my diet where I thought it should be and the beginning of recovery. On top of that, the pandemic hit. And so I quickly found my eating habits going down the tube, and I didn't practice much mindfulness at all in terms of my eating. In fact, I would eat horribly. I might eat, 2 pizzas a week and go to fast food multiple times a week and just doing whatever it took to get by, and also indulging in food to get a little bit of that pleasure hit that I was so desperate for during that time. Now, I was very honest with myself that what I was doing was not healthy. I knew that, and I knew it needed to change. And so I did start to think about very quickly, what can I do to make changes? But I didn't implement them until the health issues became very clear, and until it became clear that the incredible amount of weight that I had gained, as well as my physical health, were starting to suffer. And so then I started to mindfully get into, how am I going to improve my diet? How am I going to change my exercise? How am I going to do these things? And I started to eat much differently. I started to put a lot more thought into, what am I putting into my body? How much am I putting into my body? And here's what I noticed is that for years and years, I would be tired during the day. I would go eat lunch, for example, and then around 2 o'clock, I'd find myself at my computer starting to nod off, or in a meeting, unable to stay awake, which is the worst when you're trying to stay awake in a meeting and you got all these people around you and you're starting to nod off. And as soon as I started changing my diet and started to eat better for fueling my body and my mind, that stopped. And I would eat, for example, a salad, lots of veggies, and some lean protein at lunch. And I would finish that lunch and still be a little hungry, but not super hungry. And then in the middle of the day, in the middle of the afternoon, I didn't get that crash that I had been experiencing when I would eat like fast food, things like that. And of course, there's great reasons for this. The point is that my mental health and my ability to interact with the world around me started to change positively when I started to change the way that I ate. And so it's a really important part of recovery, because recovery is all about changing the way we interact with the world around us and making a more positive interaction with the world around us. So I agree with Tommy here. Food is one of the most important things that we have to look at in recovery. How are we eating? What are we doing? And don't get me wrong, I still have times where I go for the comfort food. I still have times where I eat things that I probably aren't super healthy for me. But I also am conscious of those times and make sure that they're not dominating my diet, and that for the most part my diet is dominated by healthful, thoughtful, mindful eating, where I'm really thinking about not only what am I putting in my body, but is it going to help me in the way that I relate to the world around me? And that's been the key to having a successful diet, where I've actually been able to lose some weight and I've been able to fuel a lot of physical activity, and where I don't feel lethargic during the day. That's all I got for today. I'll be back tomorrow with more. Have a good one.